Hey folks, Randy here doing cut and trim. So Property Squad LLC just sent me a comment on one of my videos. It said, Randy, any tips when buying a used walk behind? I have somebody selling a Ferris 36-inch hydro and asking $380 for it. Please help. So I'm going to respond to your comment, but also I'm going to do this video. So the first thing I'll say, I've never bought a used hydro. So as far as things to check for with the hydraulics, I'm not going to be as helpful as far as that. So when buying a used mower, these are just some things that I would do. The first thing is you need to go into it assuming you're going to need to replace all the belts. You should just go in assuming that. Because you don't know how long those belts are on there, and even if the guy tells you how long they're on there, he probably is just guessing. So I would plan on having to replace the belts. So, and I would also assume you're probably going to have to replace the blades. So when I buy a machine, I like to look at it and figure out how much money I'm going to have to spend in addition to the sale price to get this mower in suitable condition for working, because there's a certain amount I'm willing to spend. You know, like, I mean, the last time I bought a mower, I think I paid $650 for it, and I knew I was probably going to end up spending another couple $100 to get it ready for prime time, and that's what it ended up being. So you just bear that in mind. Now, the thing to keep in mind is a brand new 36-inch hydro, unless you're going like with Bradley, is going to set you back, you know, $5-6 grand. So that's worth keeping in mind. So this machine's $380. It's very likely that it's going to need a bunch of stuff. So the first thing I would check for is rust in the deck. If there's some rust, that's not a big deal. You can patch it. My deck has got probably 4 patches on it. So if there's some rust, it's okay. But if there's a lot of rust, especially if it's rusting through like near the spindles, it's not worth getting, because replacing a deck is really expensive. So that's the first thing I would check, is for rust in the deck. The second thing I would do is I would make sure the deck cover is obviously taken off the mower, and obviously don't have the mower on when you do this. I would, with each spindle on the deck, I would put my hand on either side of that spindle and I would try and shake it. See if there's any play like this, any play at all. There should be absolutely zero. When you go to shake it, the whole deck should shake or nothing move at all. But if the spindle itself has any tilt, any side-to-side movement, if you're able to make that spindle move at all, that spindle needs to be replaced. And so you need to know how much that's going to be. Like on my machine, I was able to find an aftermarket spindle. So if I have to replace a spindle, it's like $125. But OEM spindles can be several $100 a piece. So you want to check those. Like I said, you're going to need to replace the belts. You're going to need to replace the blades. And some of this stuff, it's going to kind of depend on, it's going to depend on how handy you are. So another thing that you need to keep in mind is the engine. I'm assuming, actually I shouldn't assume that, but I would look at I would see how easy the engine is to start from cold. I can tell you, my mower, that engine is 23 years old. 23-year-old engine. From cold, it starts on the first pull every single day. Because I maintain it well, and I've replaced the ignition coils and stuff like that. So you want to see how that engine's doing. If you've got the stuff for it, I would do a compression test on that sucker, because if the PSI is too low, you're going to end up needing a new engine, which, you know, a replacement engine, if you're going to go with a Briggs, depending on how big the engine's on there now, you might be able to get a replacement engine for $500-600. And if it's a $380 hydro, and if the engine's the only problem, I mean, $600 invested in the new engine is worth it. Excuse me. So I would check that. You're going to need new spark plug, and honestly, depending, like, you look at it, ask the guy. If he's never replaced the ignition module, I would just kind of plan on either replacing or adjusting it, or, you know, I would just plan on doing that. Let's see, what else? As far as the hydraulics go, you know, those pumps and motors can be expensive. You know, I mean, so, you know, it depends on how much money you want to dump into the machine. You know, if they're working fine, I hate to say this in a way, in like a, I don't want to sound stupid, but if they're working fine, I would guess they're fine, but you would probably want to look at some other videos, you know, somebody that knows more about this stuff than I do. Another thing with the engine is, if the engine is, excuse me, check the engine oil, see how black it is and how low it is. You know, again, you know, if you're comfortable replacing an engine on a $400 mower is not a big deal. I mean, you're still coming out way ahead. But you know, if it's low on oil and the oil's black, then, you know, I'd fair to assume they haven't been maintaining it properly. Which also would mean that's actually something to kind of keep in mind. If the engine oil is looking rough, you know, that's like one of the most basic things. And if they're not taking care of that, then, you know, what else are they not taking care of? Let's see, what else would I look at? Another thing to keep in mind, I just remembered this later. So this video is actually going to have edits in it, man. Another thing to keep in mind is how the blades are engaged. If they're, honestly, it's better in the long run for an older machine if it's a blade that's manually engaged, because there's hardly anything that can go wrong with that. But if it's an electric PTO, you want to make sure that sucker works perfectly. Again, unless you're comfortable fixing stuff. You know, replacing a clutch on a mower is not a big deal to do. You know, I mean, it's not. But as long as you're comfortable doing it. But if the PTO, if it's not working perfectly, that's just something else to keep in mind. You might have to replace it. I mean, you know, clutches are cheap. I mean, well, that's not true. They're $300-400, or you can get some aftermarket ones for, you know, $200, $250. But that's just something else to keep in mind. That the PTO, make sure however you activate the blades is in good working condition, and then also make sure your safety features are engaged. I would not buy a machine where the safety features have been disabled. I think that's foolish. So that's it, unless I remember something else. I mean, those are the main things that are coming to my mind right now. The other thing I would just do, and I have done this with everything I've bought, is look on the side of the mower. There should be, on most mowers, there's 3 serial numbers you're going to want. There's the engine serial number, there's the tractor serial number, and there's the deck serial number. And you're going to want to run those serial numbers to make sure that you can actually get parts for these machines. You know, if you're kind of handy, you can kind of work around some of like parts issues, but you know, you want to be able to check, because like, I mean, if I guess for example, like my mower, the replacement spindles for my mower are like $500 a piece, and OEM transmission is $800. You know, like, that's a lot. Now fortunately I was able to figure out how to, you know, get an aftermarket transmission and find aftermarket spindles, so it wasn't the end of the world. But, you know, if I wasn't able to do that, that would have been an issue. Actually, the main spindle, I was able to find an aftermarket for it, but the other one that, you know, has only got the one, that only has the one belt going to it, not 2, that one's discontinued. So I would actually need to figure out, you know, a suitable replacement for that if it went bad. But I was able to grab a spindle off another machine, so I actually do have a backup for that. But those are the things I would keep in mind, is just to make sure that I can get parts for it, and then, you know, check those different things. that I mentioned. The rust is a big thing, you know, but I mean the rest of it, you know, it's pretty, a lot of parts are pretty standard. You know, tires aren't a big deal. If you got to replace tires, whatever. So the main thing is just figure out what you're willing to actually spend on this mower, and then kind of work it back from there, you know. And you know, hopefully it works out for you, man. $380 for a Hydros. I mean, that's great. You know, and I think Ferris is a good brand. Ferris definitely has a very prestigious look. I don't know if they're a prestigious brand, but they do have a very, like a very classic look. Like I like the way their machines look. So, good luck with that, man. If there's other things that you think you should look into, as far as like when you're going to buy a used machine, post it in the comments below, because I'm sure once this gets posted, I'm gonna be like, man, I should have said that. Anyway, for anyone doing cut and trim, have a good one.